Good morning. It's March 22nd, 2022. Look at all those number twos. Welcome to Triggered. I'm Cory Morgan. This show is going to be coming to you live every day at 11:30 a.m. Mountain Standard Time, Monday to Friday. It's the Western Standard's daily live show. We cover the top news stories that are going on, get the ranting out of my system, and tend to get a number of good and interesting guests on. Being live, we have the comments, as we can see, from Vince and Jenna. I encourage the comments, bring them out, talk with each other, try and fire comments out to me or the guests. They don't always have to be favorable, but try to keep them polite. I don't always necessarily get them out to the guests, but when I can, I do, because I like sharing those other points of view. And I like seeing a lively discussion going on in the comments section. It keeps this more active and so on, rather than some of those, canned recorded interviews that some other places offer. But of course, keep in mind, we're live. We get those technical hiccups now and then too. It's all par for the course here. So, as Vince Alberta was saying, Trudeau, Singh, the happy couple, and that's what I'm going to start off talking a little bit about. Welcome to a new government in Canada. Not really, and it's not a formal coalition, but the Liberals and the NDP have formed a tight alliance, and they're hoping to maintain power until 2025 with this. So, in this unholy alliance, Jagmeet Singh has fully tossed his NDP under the bus, and he's formally joined Justin Trudeau at the hip as they brokered a deal to maintain power for the next 3 years together. Singh's credibility as an independent party leader was already terribly shot when he joined hands with Justin and supported the invocation of the Emergencies Act for a few disastrous hours last February. The imposition of the Emergencies Act was an international embarrassment as the world watched a prime minister in utter panic invoking a form of martial law in order to shut down protests crippling the city of Ottawa under his watch. The protests were almost gone. The borders were open. It was just bouncy castles and individuals, but Justin felt he needed this Emergencies Act to do it. Now, the NDP had traditionally been a party that stood up without compromise for the right to protest, if nothing else. They jealously guarded individual rights as Tommy Douglas opposed Pierre Trudeau's imposition of the War Measures Act, even when the FLQ was literally murdering people through acts of terrorism. Singh tossed that traditional NDP adherence to the principle of protests aside as he pursued the principle of power, and it backfired on him. The NDP silence was deafening as Trudeau backtracked on the Emergency Act less than 48 hours after forcing it through Parliament. Now that committees are starting to evaluate just what happened in Ottawa during those protests, the Prime Minister's looking weaker than ever, especially his case for invoking that act. The government claims of foreign funding of the protests have been disproven. There's been no organized effort for sedition found anywhere, and no wild-eyed, crazed leaders could really be identified to point at. Tamara Leach was a prime organizer, but upon examination, it became clear that she's as harmless as any other concerned Canadian citizen. The government's embarrassed itself over the whole entire convoy debacle, and they know it. People are getting tired of Trudeau's weak leadership, and the NDP are truly starting to get tired of Singh's policy of lapdogging for Trudeau. The Conservative Party of Canada is holding a well-contested leadership race and may very well emerge from this race with a strong contender to lead the nation. The Liberals may not be able to rely on weak leaders from the CPC in the next election, and it's making them nervous. In a minority government, the risk of a snap election always hangs over the heads of the party in power, or pretty much any party. Trudeau's marriage with Singh has reduced that risk for a while, but it won't eliminate it. With a commitment to setting up a national dental, pharmaceutical, and housing plan being made, the Trudeau Liberals are going to quickly expand our already ballooning debt. And of course, that's going to add to the inflation that's pressuring Canadians while we got these tax hikes looming, including a carbon tax coming right around the corner. If financial issues pressure Canadians much more, Liberal support's going to plummet. While the NDP won't pull the plug on a government in that case, the Liberal MPs might pull the plug on Trudeau. When those Liberals' own necks are on the line, their loyalty will fade fast. It's well within the realm of possibility the Liberal Party will tear their own leader down in hopes of regaining public support if it sinks. And Singh, he can only roll over for so long as he's losing internal support within his party as well. While his party members surely enjoy the big spending concessions being won with this alliance, they have to be chafing in having such a close relationship with the Liberals that they traditionally actually despise. Now, while there's no formal coalition, the NDP won't be sitting in cabinet. They're going to be bound to play nice with their Liberal allies and in committees. And these investigative committees will be pressured to bury any adverse actions when it comes to Liberal actions and government actions. And the NDP MPs on those committees probably won't be happy with that. I mean, there was a lot of bad government, and principled MPs want to speak out about that and expose it. They're going to have a hard time doing so now under this alliance. While Trudeau and Singh are claiming this alliance is going to last till 2025, that's pretty unlikely in reality. What they have done is bought themselves some time, nothing more. If somehow the Liberals surge in the polls, hey, they won't hesitate to call a snap election. And if they slump very badly, they're going to shed their leader and likely be pushed into a new election by a new leader. There's not going to be any winner in all this political brinkmanship being played, only losers. And as usual, those losers are going to be Canadians at large as we foot the bill for this increasingly ineffective federal government. That's where I'm at this morning. Now, let's talk to Melanie and see what we have topping the news today. Hey there, Mel. How's it going?
Hi. Good. Busy as usual. As you're exactly what you're speaking out, we've got a story about that on the website right now. Liberals NDP announcing their alliance to keep the government in power till 2025. And of course, Trudeau has been heard saying that he will stay on as long as he possibly can to lead the country. We have another story up from Chrystia Freeland, who said an independent media snub was an isolated event. So you can check that one out. Another story that has been of quite interest is about an unvaccinated man who was blocked from, so he had returned to Canada, was blocked from leaving Canada and prevented from leaving for about 2 months. He finally was able to get out of the country and a follow-up with him, he's saying he will never return to the country again. We've got a story from our reporter Amanda, who put out a story showing that Canada has ranked in the bottom 10 of world countries on individual liberties. So we are lower than Saudi Arabia, we are lower than Russia when it comes to individual liberties. So check that one out. We have got our reporter Eva put out a story on an Angus Reid poll that is basically showing the Tory leadership race is really kind of between Poilievre and Charest at this point. So you can see how that breaks down. We've also got Canada's last Afghanistan ambassador fled the country in August after the rapid collapse was happening once NATO troops were withdrawn. So you can read up a little bit more about that and how the ambassador said it was a very dangerous situation. Federal government hesitant to decriminalize street drugs. So that is a good read. Bernier is fighting a Saskatoon COVID election night ticket. I believe he has fought a number of tickets over the last few years through the pandemic. We've got a story about a judge who criticized the Leaders Debates Commission after Rebel News was barred from covering the debates and then was awarded an injunction, a last-minute emergency injunction in order to do so. Coming up, Doug Ford government is introducing new legislation giving his government permanent enforcement tools to deal with what the government will deem is an illegal blockade. So we'll have that on the site very soon here. We also have a breakdown or a recap of the events that happened throughout the weekend with the protests that happened in downtown in the Beltline, at Central Memorial Park, at City Hall. There's sort of a recap of everything that happened there, including some tense moments, and we've got a lot of video footage in that one. And also there is the Alberta Auditor General's report is coming out this afternoon, so we will certainly be digging that apart.
Great. Well, plenty of stuff for us to chew on as usual today. Another busy news day. And yeah, it's really worth looking into all that stuff. That was really a crazy weekend of protests in downtown Calgary. And we had a number of people on the ground, including yourself, watching that. And there's a lot of video and stories on that for people to follow up to just kind of see what these protests have kind of devolved into.
Well, and it sounds like there will be more protests this coming weekend. Looks like they will be moving to Princess Island Park, as we're hearing. So we are going to get details about that. Hoping to try to get a chat with the Calgary Police Service, see if there's, what the plans are heading into this coming weekend. And we will also be there doing live coverage again this weekend.
Great. Well, thanks for the update. I'll let you get back on putting all that news out, Melanie, and we'll see you after the show.
Thanks, Cory.
Great. Thanks. So yeah, lots and lots going on. I neglected to mention earlier my guests for today, actually, as I was talking about mistakes we make during live shows occasionally. John Gorman from the Canadian Nuclear Association is going to be coming on. I'm looking forward to that. We don't hear enough talk about nuclear power options in Canada. And as we go into an energy crisis, our costs shoot through the roof. We don't see much push for what is at least an emissions-free sort of form of producing generation of electricity. After that, I'm going to have Dave Makichuk on a little later, and we're going to talk about Arctic sovereignty, which when I did my interview with Jean Charest the other day, he brought that up. Actually, it was just well-timed. And as I'd said on that interview too, I've worked in the Arctic for a number of years. It's an area I'm very familiar with and quite concerned about it. It's where Canada's really been dropping the ball on ourselves for quite some time now. So just that reminder, and that's why these news reads are starting to take so long. We have been expanding. We've been doing fantastic here with the Western Standard. We have an Ottawa division on the go now. We've got a legislative reporter in Edmonton. We've got Reed out in BC, all sorts of people here, and they're just putting out that news content and good, unique, original news content all the time. We've got a new one now, and I'm going to be talking to him soon, is Chris Oldcorn. He's out in Saskatoon. He'll be on the show a little later this week. And we could do all this because of subscribers. So thank you all who have subscribed already. I got to remind you all, if you haven't subscribed, take one out, use the coupon code TRIGGERED, and you get $10 off. It's a free trial for 2 weeks. You got nothing to lose here. Sign up, test us out for 2 weeks, see if it's worth your while getting beyond the paywall, seeing these original stories, seeing these columns. 95% of people say, yes, this is well worth $10 a month. They sign up. Hey, it's only $99 if you sign up for a whole year. And again, use that code TRIGGERED, and you will save further. And hey, it's a good deal. We all need to save money right now. We got a carbon tax coming around the corner here. Let's talk a little bit more about the ranting. Jackie Burton just saying a question: if down the road in 2025 Conservatives get in, can the Trudeau and NDP pull them down with a non-confidence vote? Yes, they can if it's a minority Conservative government, and assuming that the NDP and the Liberals have made up enough people to overpower that government. Or we could see, as happened with Harper, even in a minority, they could try and push, though that never quite happened, but they could theoretically push the Governor General to recognize a formal coalition government of those two rather than the Conservative government. So it really, and we look at these alliances, if the Conservatives are going to come in Canada, they're going to need a majority. They have to get a majority, not a minority government. It will not last long. The NDP and Liberals have proven themselves to be very little different from each other and more than willing to get together and do stuff. Somebody said something along the lines of, can the Senate step in on government? That was Brenda asked that. No, not really. I mean, there's nothing the Liberals and the NDP are doing that isn't legitimate or allowed. I mean, that's the way it works in that system. They can get together. As I said earlier, it's not even a formal coalition. A formal coalition government would mean they would share cabinet seats and a lot of other positions. This is an alliance. They got an informal agreement. That's why I don't think it's going to last all the way till 2025 anyways. But it gives them some feeling of stability. And of course, Trudeau had to sign his soul away to some NDP concessions, and the NDP have to swallow a lot of pride to basically become part of the Liberal Party. But there's nothing for the Senate to step in on in a sense in this. I mean, they might want to step up on some policies if they don't feel they're appropriate or things like that, I guess, if they were coming down the pipe. But there's nothing much else to be done for it. Eventually, there will be a non-confidence vote, or the government will run the full 5 years, and that's how long it is legally. 5 years they could go in power if nothing else pulls them out, or they could just choose to call an election at some point. Time will tell. I don't think we're going to see one very soon, but my prediction, for what it's worth, and that's very far out, I mean, in this crazy political world, is that they're not going to make it all the way till 2025. Even if they want to. Cheryl saying Justin didn't keep his word about trees planted and drinking water and reserves. What makes Jagmeet think Justin will keep his word to him? I don't think Singh thinks that Justin will keep his word, but he just wants to keep in power like so many others. And I don't know. I mean, Justin has lied repeatedly. He hasn't kept up with any of his promises. Well, I shouldn't say any, but very, very many of them. We remember way back when he first got in, he said it was the last first past the post election. That fell by the wayside. Government, budgets balance themselves, all sorts of things. But the thing is, Canadians keep rewarding him by putting him back in. So I don't know what it will take. Obviously, the truth doesn't serve Justin well, so he'll stick to just blowing sunshine up our backsides, and it seems to win him elections. The ball is in the Conservative Party's court at this point. They have a leadership race going on. There's a lot of candidates. Hopefully, not only getting a leader that a lot of Canadians or enough Canadians can accept is the outcome of that race, but they really, as a party, have to get together and figure out how they can sell a product that is satisfying to Canadians at large enough to win a majority. Unfortunately, the way Canada is laid out, it's a rare occasion. I mean, the Liberal Party dominates in the last few generations. It's breaks with Conservative parties in between long dynasties of Liberal governments. And I don't see many indications it'll change too soon. That's why I feel that, the problem with Canada is systematic rather than party, and look at it in the long term. But I mean, for the short term gain, if we could get some Conservatives in there for a little while, it would certainly take some of the pain off us for a bit. But inevitably, this country, I think, is going down a bad path in general. Let's see. And Roxy saying the Senate needs to stop this too. There's nothing to stop, I'm afraid. It's an alliance of elected officials. There's nothing that one can do about it. It's they're all elected. They can do whatever they like. As far as that goes, I mean, if they put a policy in, the Senate perhaps could stop the national dental program that Trudeau's looking to put in, or the housing program. I mean, these things are going to cost billions. It's crazy with what they're looking to do. There's no doubt about that. But they're not doing anything technically illegal or immoral, to be honest. It's just a matter of getting together and saying that's what they want to do. We don't have recall legislation of any sort, so there isn't anything we can do between elections to change these guys out if we wanted to. And again, I think Toronto, Vancouver, Montreal, they're happy enough with this group anyways. They wouldn't recall them even if they could. So we got to ride this out. I would say be careful with your money, because they're coming for it. We got the carbon tax coming. We've got inflation hitting us like all get out right now. And I don't know what it's going to take to stop it. I'll segue that in to talk about one of our sponsors while I'm at it. Reminding you this is a government that will come for your money when they get the chance, and they did so. They seized bank accounts. This is still all going through committee, and it's going to go through courts. Get your money out of your bank account, or at least some of it. Hedge your bets. Get into digital currencies, and Bitcoin Well are the guys who will help you do that. They are a Western Canadian company, publicly traded, reliable, respectable. These are real folks on the ground. If you're interested in getting into digital currencies, these are the guys that can help lead you there. Their website's great. Like, it's for digital currency beginners. It shows you how to get involved, how you set it up, and how to keep your funds safe. There's a lot of services out there. Unfortunately, they're a little sketchy, a little harder to trust. And of course, it's your money. You worked hard for it. You want to make sure it's safe. Well, these guys are safe, and that money is always in your hands. But you can start setting some aside, perhaps, in a Bitcoin wallet, and they will help show you how that can be done. They have one-on-one personalized service, real face-to-face with people. And even, face-to-face through virtual means if you aren't in some of the cities they are, such as they are in Western Canada. So by all means, get out there and check those guys out. Take control of your money. You worked very hard for it. And perhaps that's the way you want to go. And that's the thing with Bitcoin Well, too. They're educational. Maybe it's not for you. Maybe digital currencies aren't where you want to go. That's okay, too. But it's worth looking at with these guys. And just to follow up with a lot of a myth going on, Marvin, for example, Marvin Cherry Stewart saying, didn't Bitcoin get locked up too? No, it didn't. The government cannot get at your cold wallet. The problem you're going to have is if your bank account is locked up, then you might have troubles getting the funds out of that or transferring it into a means of making it more liquid for you. But the government can't get into those digital currencies. And I'm certain they want to. We'll see down the road. But for the time being, no, that's one of the areas they didn't get into. So we'll get out of that. I see my guest, I've been looking forward to this, is in the lobby there. And as I said, we've had a lot of energy discussion, and this is a portion of the energy discussion we just don't hear nearly enough about. So we've got John Gorman. He's the president of the Canadian Nuclear Association, and we're going to explore some of those power generation options within Canada. So let's bring John in here. Hey, how you doing?
Hello, Cory. Very well,
Hey.
thanks.
I appreciate you coming on. As you might have heard a little bit in the lead up, and as you're more aware than anybody, we're in the world's in an energy crisis. We're really scrambling, trying to figure out how to keep energy affordable, reliable, and safe. And while we talk about all these different options, it just seems nuclear keeps falling by the wayside for some reason. I mean, we do have nuclear generation in Canada. It's not some banned sort of thing. It's been happening, but there's not a lot of discussion on expanding it, is there?
Well, you're absolutely right, Cory. We do have some nuclear in Canada, more than a little. About 16% of Canada's electricity comes from nuclear energy. It has for a number of decades now. About 2/3 of Ontario's electricity and about 1/3 of New Brunswick's electricity. And of course, we have the world's second largest exporter of uranium right next door to Alberta in Saskatchewan, and Alberta sharing that Athabasca Basin, which holds, I think, the world's biggest reserves of uranium. So world-class provider of nuclear for a number of decades. And of course, it was on the basis of nuclear that in Ontario, we were able to phase out coal-fired electricity generation, which continues to be the single largest carbon reduction initiative in North America. So you're right. It is surprising that we don't see the federal government being clear about the role that nuclear has played in Canada and can continue to play across Canada as we strive to have that secure, clean, affordable electricity system that we know has to grow.
So nuclear generation, I mean, the big thing these days is of course, carbon emissions. That's what people are looking to reduce. And most forms of generating energy will emit a degree. I mean, we're getting better at mitigating, but there's still a great deal of it when it comes to petrochemical forms of generation, or even in damming areas, there's been some concerns about methane emissions. Nuclear doesn't emit any carbon when it's generating, right?
That's right, and in fact, it's according to the United Nations, it's the lowest full life carbon cycle footprint of any electricity generation source. So, very, very low carbon. And what we're particularly excited about, Cory, is the innovations that are going on in the industry right now, particularly around small modular reactors. This latest generation of very scalable high temperature heat and electricity that can be produced, and excited about its applications for Alberta, particularly in the oil sands, where we can use that very high temperature heat to help in SAGD operations and replace some of the fossil fuels that are used in the production of oil and gas, so that as we go into this lower carbon future, Alberta continues to produce the most responsible and lowest carbon product that we can. And nuclear is going to be absolutely key to that.
Yeah, and our premier in Alberta, I believe he spoke about that recently with these modular generation. And what I like about that is it's not an either or thing. It's not somebody talking saying, well, we have to shut down and get out of the oil sands or natural gas or things like that. They can complement each other. These can actually, again, getting towards mitigation of emissions, but still we're going to develop our resources and do what we can while they're still viable. And it could be a very good partnership.
Well, you're absolutely right. That energy transition that we're all looking for has to involve all forms of carbon mitigation as we make the transition, right? We know that oil and gas are going to be needed for quite some time. It powers 80% of the world's economy. So I think we need clear recognition by this federal government that it's going to take all technologies to make that happen. And in Canada's case, that means carbon capture and storage. It means hydrogen. It means wind, water, solar, and of course nuclear. The great thing about nuclear is, as you're alluding to, Cory, is we can use it to do multiple things. We can connect it to the electricity grid to produce clean electricity, or we can take these smaller, very scalable, small modular reactors and use them in industrial settings, whether it's to produce and use that high temperature heat to produce steel and cement, potash, or in the oil sands to use it to produce that high temperature steam that's used for extraction and lower the carbon on that as we transition to a lower carbon future.
So, I mean, one of the bigger hangups with nuclear and expanding on it, and it's always been there, is fear. I mean, and safety. I see a commenter, Terry, saying, no nuclear in Alberta. Ontario's dangerous with Darlington, and he brings up Fukushima and Chernobyl.
Mhm.
But I mean, statistically, nuclear is exceedingly safe.
It is exceedingly safe. It's as safe as any other electricity source out there. And when I say that, I mean, again, going back to the United Nations, as safe as wind and solar production in terms of kilowatt hour of electricity production. So we do have there are real questions that people have about nuclear, particularly now as they look to examine the different technology solutions that are available to us as we try to strive through this transition into a lower carbon world. And so nuclear is getting a close look at, and in the process of doing that, there are very legitimate questions that come up. Some of it is based on misinformation and stigma, of course, from things that have happened in the past or been blown out of proportion. And so we're trying to engage people in those discussions, make them understand that nuclear is not only a very safe way of producing electricity, but is produced in the most responsible way of any other electricity generation source. And I'm talking here about another concern that comes up often, which is the nuclear waste, right? The spent fuel. And the fact is that dealing with spent fuel is a very straightforward thing to do. There has never been anyone injured, let alone killed by spent fuel here at home or globally. And we have a very complete plan in place that deals responsibly with every bit of waste that the industry produces. It's prepaid for, and we have a permanent storage facility going through the approvals process now. So a very good story on the waste as well. But we need to engage people in discussions like this, Cory, so they understand what nuclear can do.
Well, yeah, and unfortunately, humanity being humanity, one of the first things we did with nuclear power once we made breakthroughs and developed it was find ways to blow each other off the map. And it does put a vision in people's heads. They think nuclear weapons when they think of nuclear. And I mean, we should be able to separate, I mean, the weaponry from the power generation. They're completely different applications, and one wouldn't feed into the other at all, right?
No, that's right. In fact, there really is no direct correlation between nations that have developed nuclear power as a pathway to get nuclear weapons. So that's the first thing that I'd like to say. But when it comes to Canada and other nations who are developing nuclear power for clean electricity and clean heat, these nations sign up to very strict international cooperation agreements that subject them to, very intense scrutiny by the international regulator, which is the International Atomic Energy Agency. And so, if you were in the game of being a nation that was looking to develop, nuclear weapons, starting with nuclear power and having to have the International Atomic Energy Agency literally living with you, it's kind of like inviting your parents-in-law into your house to help you raise your children when you decide to go the nuclear power route. It's probably the least attractive way of trying to develop nuclear weapons, right? So Canada has very strict agreements that it has signed on to, ensuring that it only uses nuclear for power purposes and not for weapons. And similarly, we've got a very robust framework internationally around that.
So over the years, has cost effectiveness of nuclear infrastructure and generation come down? Because a lot of past projects needed a lot of subsidies in order to get rolling, and some people have had questions that perhaps it's not the most cost-effective way of generating power. Has that improved?
Well, yeah, I'd look at that in two different ways, Cory. Firstly, the conventional nuclear plants are very large and have typically involved state financing. So if you call that, a form of subsidy, then yes, I mean, these huge infrastructure projects have required state funding. And many of the projects, like all infrastructure projects, are subject to going over budget depending on where you are. And those are the examples that always get pointed to. But I think the most exciting developments that's been happening in the industry lately is this new innovation in small modular reactors. So these very small, scalable, high temperature heat machines They are produced in factories. Many of them are, able to fit on large trucks and shipped to site. So they're mass manufactured. They can be financed by private investment firms rather than the state itself. And in this case, it's through the production of multiple units, the way that we envision there being a huge market demand in Canada for these, that you're able to keep costs low. And so we see a lot of potential in that being very cost effective.
Great. Yeah, and those modular ones do sound very interesting. Looking farther north, I'm wondering, I'm going to be talking actually to a columnist about Arctic sovereignty a little later, and I'd worked in the Arctic sometime in the past, and in some of those smaller towns up there, a few thousand people, they predominantly get their generation through diesel, which is very expensive to ship and difficult, and well, just not the most environmentally friendly form. Would modular potentially have applications in those isolated communities?
Absolutely. Some of the units that we're looking at are very small, right? They can go down to as small as, let's say, 2 megawatts, which would be enough to power a couple hundred households, for example, right? And then they scale up to about 300 megawatts, which is quite large. But with these smaller ones, you can bring these to a northern community or to a northern mining operation or industrial operation. But let's take the example of a northern Indigenous community. You can place it there to be producing not only electricity, but that high temperature heat, as we were saying. And that heat can be used for heating homes, in a geothermal type setup or heat pump type setup. And at the same time, you could be producing hydrogen. You can actually be doing all three of these things at one time, whether you're in an oil sands operation or in a northern community producing hydrogen, high temperature steam, and electricity. And so many of these units are able to be on site. They don't have to be touched or refueled. Some of the technologies for as much as 20 years, right? And you avoid, to your point, Cory, you avoid not only the emissions associated and the cost associated with diesel, but as you know, it's getting harder and harder to have the safe transport of diesel or any type of really heavy commodities as the climate warms, right? Those windows are getting smaller. So this is certainly a prime application for small modular reactors.
Yeah, so we have been exporting uranium. As you said, we're a large exporter. We're a big producer in northern Saskatchewan. I think a lot of those mines, though, have been stopped and shut in. Is there still a lot of deposits remaining, though? Like if we expanded our consumption of fuels, would we still have the means to produce them?
We do. In fact, we're sitting on some of the best reserves in the world. There have been a number of studies done recently as the world is going through this sort of nuclear renaissance now and recognizing that we're going to need a lot of new nuclear as we strive towards this net zero future. Certainly lots of supply of uranium to meet our needs. New technologies that are coming on board now that actually use the spent fuel from the conventional reactors to power these new reactors. So a sort of recycling of fuel, which is very exciting. And Cory, as you've probably seen, the price of uranium stocks, Cameco and others, going through the roof now, just in recognition of the fact that a lot of new nuclear build out is going to take place.
So I guess just another aspect, if we expanded our mining or streamlined it more, there's markets as well, I guess, for a lot of product for other applications such as diagnostic medicine, X-rays, things such as that as well, right?
Yeah, Canada. One of the things that's often overlooked about nuclear is its innovation in medical isotopes, so nuclear medicine. And Canada is one of the world's foremost producers of various types of isotopes. I think we produce about 70% of the most familiar one, which is cobalt, used in diagnostics around cancer and X-ray machines, etc. But lately, Canada has been leading the world in terms of new types of very targeted isotopes that are being produced right from the running plants in Ontario at the Darlington and the Bruce power sites. So this is a sort of breakthrough in terms of how we're able to produce isotopes and, as a consequence, ship them around the world to help other nations. And just a very promising area for nuclear medicine, and in particular cancer treatment, as we go forward.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you coming in to explain a lot of that, because it is a big growth area. There's a lot of misconceptions or fear. And I mean, the more we could, they're valid concerns. I mean, people worry. You see some bad scenes or things, from inappropriate utilization, I guess, or poor use of nuclear in other applications. Is there something else you'd like to touch upon before I let you go there, John?
Yeah, thanks, Cory. I think just to go back to a point I mentioned at the beginning, which is one of the things that I'm personally most excited about, is just the opportunity that there is for Alberta to diversify its energy sector and its workforce with the additional jobs and the additional expertise of nuclear. It's not only the proximity to the uranium deposits and things, which is helpful, but it's this application of small modular reactors for its high temperature industrial heat, clean heat, which can really provide a competitive advantage to our valuable oil and gas sector, and at the same time be developing a new stream of jobs, which has to do with nuclear operation of these high temperature heat plants. So I think that's a very exciting pathway for nuclear, and I'm glad to see that Premier Kenney is such a vocal champion of the technology.
Yeah, well, I'm looking forward to seeing it expanding further. I think we're really have been behind too long on this issue in general, so we're seeing it moving ahead. Where can we find more information about your organization and about nuclear in Canada in general then?
Well, I think you've been kind enough to show the audience some of the information that's on our website, and I'd suggest that as the first place to go. So www.cna, Canadian Nuclear Association, that's cna.ca, and great place to start, and a lot of resources on there that give your listeners the most up-to-date information.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for coming on to join us today, and I'm really looking forward to seeing those modular, innovations coming along. It really could be a game changer in a lot of areas and industries.
Thank you, Cory.
Great, thanks.
Bye-bye.
So yes, that was John Gorman, the president of the Canadian Nuclear Association, and as I said, I'm very interested in this. There's people, and their concerns are valid. I mean, nuclear is scary. It's very potentially dangerous, potentially. I mean, if it's done wrong, we have to look at the whole world history on it. There are, I believe, thousands of reactors around the world. Like, the only major real problems we had was Chernobyl. Yeah, it was run by, Soviet system that couldn't really manufacture a reliable alarm clock, much less safely run a nuclear facility, unfortunately, and it led to a horrible disaster. Fukushima, well, yes, but again, it was a localized disaster. The earthquake itself was the bigger disaster rather than the nuclear release, but it's still of concern. Sure, it's of concern. But again, you can't forget the thousands and thousands, I mean, millions of megawatts of power that have been generated through nuclear perfectly safely. And, we got to look at some other aspects of diversifying the economy and things. And as I was saying in the Arctic, it could be interesting getting some different forms of generating power up there. Those people need it. It's expensive, and we could develop other resources while we're at it. It's like Pat and Drziak is saying, a pity we have to think nuclear when we have a good supply of oil and gas. But it doesn't have to be either or. The nuclear can supplement the production of the oil and gas. That was talked about with the oil sands. Like the oil sands, for people familiar with, SAGD and some of those terms, that steam-assisted, gravity development or something like that. Boy, now I'm forgetting it. I've been out of the field too long. But the thing is, you need to generate a lot of heat and steam to do it. And you're burning natural gas to do that. If we're using nuclear to bring that heat about, to heat that steam, to extract the bitumen from the oil sands, then we can export the petrochemical products from that, plus the natural gas that we were burning previously to get the stuff from the oil sands, we could be exporting or burning here for our local power supplies. Like, it's just win-win-win. And being modular, these are smaller and perhaps a little more affordable. But we can look a little broader with it. To Sanico, well, you're suspicious of everything, Sanico, but that's okay. So this is suspicious of the new wave push for nuclear power and who's pushing it. I think a lot of consumers are pushing it. People who do want to reduce emissions are pushing it. And I'm not seeing a big push. That's why I brought Mr. Gorman on. I wish, in my view, it was a bigger push. We need to move on. Wildrose saying Alberta doesn't need nuclear power. We have oil and gas. Well, that's like saying we don't need carrots because we grow grain. Come on, guys. We can walk and chew gum. We can produce a number of forms of energy. It doesn't have to be either or. 3 Mile Island. Yes, and Elisa, that happened. You know how many died there? 0. So that's what I mean with 60 years of nuclear generation, we can only point to a handful. I could point to, if I wanted to list them, a whole pile of thousands of people who've died from mining coal, people who've died in oil field accidents. There's been a lot of energy generation projects that unfortunately have led to harm. Nuclear isn't much worse than the rest of them. Some people pointing out, though, when we got Trudeau in charge, do we want to give him more authority over things like that? Well, we already do. There's a lot of nuclear already, and it's getting older. Looks like somebody was there. We are. Steam-assisted gravity draining. Thank you, Daryl. I was brain farting on that one. But there's a lot of forms of generation. We shouldn't rule any out. We don't have large rivers that can be dammed. If we're looking to generate power, there's one of those things from the green kooks, if there are on our case, to reduce emissions, things like that. Oh, well, hydro. Well, yeah, that's great in Quebec. That's great in even BC. And even there, they can't get Site C through. There's another thing, too. I mean, nuclear plants and even the modular ones, we know we'll get opposition. But there's John Gormley, he's a great radio host in Saskatchewan, for those who are familiar with him. And I'm pretty sure he's the one who coined it. He used to call them PAVEs. I think it was John. And that's people against virtually everything. It doesn't matter what you do, somebody's going to oppose it. And you know what? We need power. We need revenue. We need economic recovery. And at some point, the PAVEs have to be said, well, we're sorry you're concerned, but we're going ahead. We have to do it. It has to get done. Shirley asking about nuclear waste. That was addressed on the show. And nuclear, if you look that up, the amount of waste, well, two things. For one, they're getting better at actually utilizing the waste now for further use in products. As well, as you heard, it's stored in barrels and dumped in the ocean. No. Canada does not do that. And it's a very small amount of waste, and it's actually very easy to contain it. If you look that up with nuclear, I know I'm starting to sound like an advocate, but yeah, I am pro-nuclear. But I understand people here aren't necessarily pro as well, and that's why we're having the discussion. Alberta just needs to be a sovereign nation. Well, I agree there, but that has nothing to do with nuclear. But the nuclear wouldn't hurt, I guess, is having more domestic energy generation. I'll speak to a sponsor quickly too before we move on with things, and let's talk about the Canadian Shooting Sports Association. These guys, they've been sponsoring us for a while, and their name says what they are. They're an association for people into shooting sports, and it's not just necessarily sports, target shooting, trap shooting, hunting. It could be just collecting. You might just like the things you might like trading in firearms. Well, these guys are your resource. This is where you get together. You can network with other firearm owners. You can find resources. Where's there going to be trade shows, videos on safe utilization of firearms, and most importantly, protecting your right and ability to use and enjoy firearms. And we have a government that is constantly infringing on that right. They're constantly illegalizing perfectly safe, legal firearms and taking them out of your hands. These guys have a number of legal challenges pushing back against the Liberal government on your behalf to protect your right to enjoy these firearms. And they can't do it without your help. You've got to get up. You got to take out a membership with them. It's a frog and water thing. Little by little, they're picking away at your rights and your property and your ability. And if you don't push back, you're going to lose. So join these guys. Take out a membership. It's well worth it. The Canadian Shooting Sports. I bet you if you Google the sporting shoots, you'll still find them. Association. Their website is cssa-cila.org. Look them up, support them. They will support you. So let's get a little further on some other news stories as we get on with things. Here's one that popped up. Yes, we covered that a little while ago. If you remember, during the convoy, there was all that baloney, and I did a long rant on that about supposedly these arsons coming from the Freedom Convoy in Ottawa, and they tried taping the doors shut, and they were going to burn all these people down in an apartment building, and they felt that they even self-identified. That's where it smelled like the Juicy Smollett thing, because I guess somebody was walking through, a tenant walked by while this guy's lighting this fire, apparently. Hey, what you doing? Oh, we're going to burn your building down. We're with the Freedom Convoys. Oh, well, carry on then. And he got in the elevator and went home and went to bed. That's how realistic this tweet thread was. Yet people took it seriously. And they really believed that this ding-dong was linked with the convoy. They really believed there was these people that were looking to pull off what would have been one of the most horrific of terrorist acts in Canada. That sounds like something really happened, which still is horrifying. Some idiot really was trying to burn a building, but it had nothing to do with the convoy. And Ottawa detectives have confirmed that yesterday. They said, no, this had nothing to do with the convoy. They said it was some local man named Connor McDonald. He's been charged with arson and mischief and attempting to burn the building on February 6th. There's no information. It says, this is a quote from him, indicating he was involved in any way with the protest, which was happened to be going on while this took place. So this was a lunatic doing something otherwise. But again, we have our politicians, we had our control freaks, we had the others using this as yet one more excuse to bring in things like the Emergencies Act, to suspend individual rights, to crack down on people. There's no basis for it. I mean, we knew it was BS then. Now it's just vindication. But this is getting back to what I was talking about when it came to Justin Trudeau and Jagmeet Singh's unholy alliance. You see, we're finding these things out after the fact. This was due to a police investigation that followed up later on. But what we're also having following up right now is a lot of Senate committees, parliamentary committees, things like that. And that's where we've been getting these news. You know, Blacklock's reporter and the Western Standard's been reporting on that, finding out that a lot of these allegations from the government, or a lot of these excuses for invoking the Emergencies Act, just held no water, such as the foreign funding myth. And in this case, the supposed terrorist attempt with men taping doors shut and trying to burn down a building in Ottawa. I mean, it's a horrifying thought, but it turns out, again, as often is the case, complete BS. Apparently there was the carpet got a little burned there. I mean, it's still disturbing to think of somebody even trying to light a fire in an apartment building. But the story just stunk. I still am in shock, with people who took it seriously, elected officials and media members, while this dork was tweeting about it and gave that story. Like I said, it's just, wow, is there not any critical discussion when, as I said, with that timeline with this guy tweeting these pictures from the security thing, where a supposed apartment dweller, like I said, came in and said, hey, what are you doing? Hey, I'm burning your building down. And he scratched his head, went to bed, went to sleep. I can't judge every person's reaction to things, but I think in most circumstances, the guy might have considered calling the police or, leaving, going somewhere else, not being burned to a cinder. It was just bizarre. But people took it seriously. And that's where we went. So that's clear. That was a bunch of baloney. Oh, yeah, and the Mayor Jim Watson of Ottawa, he also told City Council, we learned the malicious intent of these protesters occupying the city. He directly blamed it on the protesters. Here's a federal judge has cited the Leaders Debates Commission for unfairly blacklisting certain media from asking questions. I think Mel talked about that as well with the news check-in earlier. She sharply criticized the commission because they blacklisted Rebel News Network again at the debates last September, and said there's room in the nation for the expression of opposing points of view. Why do we always have to push to get in? I mean, Rebel, hey, I consider them friendly competitors. They break some great stuff. They go into some areas that other media outlets don't. They can definitely be a little sensationalistic. Sometimes it's a mix between entertainment and media, but they have a place out there and they deserve that place. And we cannot let these groups and such start filtering our media. How often do we keep seeing that trend? The constant attacks, the constant ways of trying to block independent media from its ability to get out and put out their coverage on issues and on large events going on. And it's always after the fact. And unfortunately, you have to come in later on and do the court challenges to get in. And, they'll probably ban them again from future ones, and they'll have to fight. And the event is done by the time they get back in. Maybe we got to start slapping some of these commissions actually with some fines for some of the, in my view, violations of free press, which is a very integral right. You don't have to like the press outlet. I think the Red Star is an abomination of media publications in Canada. And yes, I'm referring to the Toronto Star. But I don't think it should be banned. I don't think it should get a nickel of tax dollars, but they can run their socialistic crap all they want. And they should have as much access to political events and things as well as any other media outlet. I never would want to see those sorts of things limited or banned, and we would just have to call out their slanted, gross coverage after the fact. That's the way it goes. That's what free media is about. But we are not in that. We're constantly pushing back and trying to pick and choose which ones are appropriate and not appropriate. And that's a bad recipe. And we keep seeing it. We keep seeing this happening over and over again. And it's disturbing. We have to be very concerned about this. And just to finish up with that, Michael Cormier, the Commission's executive director, is a former CBC reporter. There's a shocker. You want a good path to a government appointment, work for the CBC, the mother corp there, that tax-funded abomination there. That one I want to see gone, or at least fully privatized. That's different than even the Red Star. But he said the Commission's mandate is to ensure high journalistic standards for the leaders' debates. Well, if that was the case, how about high standards of journalistic principle in just allowing every disparate outlet to come in there and cover it, whether you like what they're going to ask or not? Okay, that's enough of me shooting at our terrible and thankfully fading away legacy media outlets. Let's bring in Dave Makichuk and get on to the next subject for the day. I've been looking forward to this as well. So where do we got him? He's coming right away. We're going to talk about Arctic sovereignty. Hey, Dave, how you doing there?
I'm good. Thank you. Hello.
Yeah. So just getting my rant on the usual things and such.
Yes.
I don't know if you caught the earlier part of the show, but I spoke with a fellow from the Canadian Nuclear Association, and talking about modular generation. And one thing, actually, a questioner in the comment scroll brought up was nuclear submarines, and I want to get into that a little bit too, as we're going to talk about Arctic sovereignty. I didn't get a chance to ask the fellow from the association on that, but framing that up, you wrote a column recently on, because we have a world in turmoil and a bunch of insanity going on. And we have a big vulnerable point to the north of us called the Arctic that we haven't been paying good enough attention to. Can you expand on that?
God, we sure do. Compared to what the Russians are doing now, we have so far to go just to keep up with what they've done. Just quickly, the Russians have put troops back in their Arctic bases. They have something like 13 of them. They've added nuclear submarines. They've added aircraft. They've also added basically aerial denial equipment. Much better equipment than we have at NORAD, and they're getting ready for a fight. And okay, well, essentially, because of the Arctic ice is melting. Now, I don't want to get into the debate over global warming or anything, but it's a fact that the Arctic ice is diminishing, and that is changing the face of the North. Like, you worked up north, I worked up north, both of us did. I was up there in the 70s, but now it's changed. It's changing, and the scary thing is Russia has all these new weapons and troops in place in the Arctic. And they're getting ready. When the ice clears, they're going to be claiming perhaps some of our sovereignty. I don't know, but it's a scary situation. And you have China, which is also claiming to be an Arctic. A near Arctic state, and of course they are, being pushed into the Russian circle with the way things are going. So that doesn't bode well. And that's not even talking about what we're doing. That's just talking about what they're doing. And that is, and we finally woken up because of Ukraine. That's the good news.
Yeah, well, people forget that, the geographic reality and with what we have now. I mean, we look at globes, we look at maps. Of course, we always look at that horizontal plane and forget that actually our neighbor straight north of us, technically the next one is Russia. And when I remember flying to Helsinki, I went from Montreal, and we didn't go across the Atlantic to get straight over to it. We actually went over the ice cap.
Wow.
In order to land down there. This is closer than people would think. And if the amount of resources still in the Arctic, I mean, that's the last frontier for a great deal of resources. As you said, it's not just Russia, it's China, and even the United States we got to be concerned about. They're
Absolutely.
all playing around under that ice cap, and we can't even get to it.
Absolutely. I mean, and in 2007, Russia had two submarines that went down 2.5 miles under the North Pole and planted a Russian flag under the North Pole to make a statement. And that, that was a long time ago. That's not even, we're not talking now. But basically, the Russians believe, well, we all believe that there are incredible resources under the Arctic, in the Arctic, especially oil reserves. The Russians said decades, possibly a century or more of oil reserves in the Arctic. And that's going to become more important. We don't know how the current situation is going to play out, but Russia is under pressure to develop those resources because they're going to need that. They're going to need that. Their economy right now is in shambles. Who knows what it'll be in 5 or 10 years, but they need that. And all it will take is one small altercation, and we'll be back to square one with the Russians in the Arctic. And if Putin is still there, I believe he wants to stay until, I'm not sure if I have this right, but he wants to stay until 2035. I'm not sure if somebody can fact check me on that, but I believe he wants to stick around. And if he's sticking around, man, we have our work cut out. And we haven't done anything. Trudeau hasn't done anything. If not for Prime Minister Harper, who ordered those what are the DeWolf patrol ships to be built. We've got one. We're going to build more. Thank God that he did that, even though they are lightly armored and they're really not icebreakers. Russia has 40 icebreakers, including 12 nuclear-powered icebreakers. We've got 12 of various types, but we have nothing. We have nothing to match. We have nothing, and our surveillance of the North is just ridiculous. Last summer, a Coast Guard cutter was in the Arctic Ocean and saw Russian and Chinese ships doing maneuvers in the Arctic Ocean, and nobody knew. For God's sake, where are our patrol planes? Where are the American patrol planes, for God's sake? This is a wide open area. It's 1/4 the size of Canada, 1/4 of our country. And we've got 1,500 troops guarding it. 1,500.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
And of those troops, I believe, I don't know if that's counted among them, but is the Rangers. But that's just been a program going on with a lot of Indigenous folks up there. And they do some good work keeping an eye on things. But they've got old Ross rifles, I believe, and snowmobiles. At best, they could spot something and report it, but it's not a defense force. They're at most monitoring.
Yes, exactly. We definitely, I should not, just to get on the positive side of things, I don't want to be all negative, but things are changing. And yesterday I listened to the Senate Committee on our Arctic security, and it was very fascinating. A lot of interesting things going on. Our minister, Anand, is meeting with the Arctic Council, which is all the countries in the north. And we are she is close to making some statements about future investment, which we desperately need in that area. We've expanded the runway in Inuvik. I sure hope we get to make a decision on these new jet fighters. Right now, we're using old Australian secondhand fighters to keep us going. We definitely need a decision whether they're going to buy the F-35s or not. We need that now. But I'll tell you one thing. One senator, I can't remember his name yesterday, but he said to the minister, DND, National Defense, he said, look, how much money is it going to take us to catch up to the Russians? Just to catch up to them. We're not, because they're so far ahead of us. How much is it going to cost? And how long is it going to take? And nobody could answer that question. They had a brigadier general. They had the head of intelligence for the Canadian Army and the Armed Forces, boss. And this DND guy and all these officials who are probably pulling down huge salaries, way more than you and I, my friend. And
it's not hard.
And let me tell you, they couldn't come up with an answer. They couldn't. The jet fighters maybe 2025, 26. The ships maybe 2025. In other words, right now we are behind the 8 ball, and we have to act fast. And we can't just count on our American friends all the time. For God's sake, the Americans now are taking notice. Also, to mention this week and this week and next week, major exercises going on up north with the U.S. Navy, with the Canadian Army, with all the NATO countries, with the United Kingdom, even a British aircraft carriers involved. All over the Arctic over the last week and going into this week, huge exercises going on, including ours was Noble Defender. It's called Noble Defender. So finally, we have woken up to protect our northern sovereignty. And I hope to God that we follow up on these announcements that the defense minister Anand makes.
Yeah, and I mean, there's some questions. People who haven't been there maybe don't quite understand just how rough and nasty the Arctic is. King Dupe was asking, why do we need? I think it was a bit of sarcasm. Why do we need icebreakers if it's melting so much? Well, to expand on that, and Don brought it up too. The Northwest Passage has been opening up more and more. I mean, we don't want to get in the discussion of why. Maybe it's a cyclical thing. Maybe it's global warming, whatever. But the reality is, it is opening up more and more. But it is seasonal. I mean, you go north of Inuvik in January, and that ocean is frozen solid. And it's just that it's open for longer periods of time. And you can get farther into the higher Arctic with these icebreakers. And just getting, because our problem is access. I mean, aside from the military and things, it's like the old trope, possession is 9/10 of the law. Well, if we ever came into a dispute with any country, whether it's the Americans, the Chinese, India for that matter, if they put up a presence in the Arctic, their case before the world court in the UN, they're going to say, well, you guys don't even go there. You don't develop it. You can't access it. How can you claim it? So we've got to make a presence up there, or we won't even have a moral case to defend it if somebody comes along and just says we're taking it.
Exactly. And I couldn't have said that better. You just hit the nail on the head. The expression, use it or lose it. And that's what it comes down to. And it's time we woke up and include in that, this is a big, bad world out there. And sunny ways are nice, but we want to be green, and we want to develop the North and bring them more power, but we want to do it with green methods and so on and so forth. But I mean, if we don't get up there and do something and do it soon, we are in big trouble. And the fact is, they couldn't answer that question. When are you going to catch up to the Russians? When? And I think, as usual, we're going to have to count on the Americans to bail us out. I mean, the Americans at least are waking up to that fact. And I think we're going to see a greater presence. And as you said, activity in the North, like fighting in the North, as it's all about, number one is survival. Number one is just surviving the weather. And knowing how to survive, knowing how to build, and all those skills are so important to our troops. And I'll say something interesting about the Americans, something they're doing. And I heard an American general talk about this. And he said, as far as Alaska goes in the Arctic Circle, we want troops up there who want to be up there. Young guys who want to be in Alaska. We don't want to just be sending troops in and forcing them to live in minus 30 weather. We want guys up there who want to be up there. And I thought, that's brilliant. That's absolutely brilliant. At least they're thinking about the future and what's coming down the line. And again, we always have to rely on our American allies. I don't know why, but and we just have not been doing, and even worse, okay? We imagine this week, and I was just telling you that all these operations, all these exercises are going on, right? Can you believe that Justin Trudeau wanted to invite the People's Liberation Army to take part in our exercises, our Arctic exercises, where they would learn our Arctic military secrets? And when the Pentagon found out about this, they said, what the hell are you doing? Like, what the hell are you doing? You can't invite the PLA to our Arctic exercises. This is what the PMO's office wanted. And of course, the Canadian military said, okay, we'll shut it down. We'll shut it down. And apparently when the PMO's office found out about this, they went ballistic. How dare you, make this decision without, having us involved. This was the situation, and it's just totally embarrassing, completely embarrassing. We went from that, imagine, to now we're all concerned. And finally, again, I'll say it again, finally, we are waking up. Finally.
Has there been any discussion at all at looking at purchasing nuclear submarines? The icebreakers aside, again, for people who don't follow that stuff very closely, the thing is, the challenge with the ice caps, you've got to submerge and you got to stay down a long, long time. And a diesel submarine is a combustion engine. It needs to carry a lot of oxygen in order to be able to move underwater and stay for extended periods. They can't get up there. Only nuclear subs can manage to stay submerged long enough. And that's why we know that the Chinese, the Americans, the Russians, probably the British, they're all messing around under our waters, but we've got absolutely no way to even get there. So has there even been discussion, though, of getting that capability?
This goes back to the agreement, the disagreement between our allies, the United States and us, where we're both kind of laying claim to the Northwest Passage. Now, we've sort of apparently sign some sort of agreement where we'll talk about it in future, type of thing. But as for the submarines, apparently there's these new batteries. I think Japan has come up with a way of putting new batteries, in submarines, which can actually last longer under ice. They can actually last longer under ice. But again, that's not anywhere near what a nuclear submarine could do. But the expenditure, we're too cheap to buy new F-18 fighter jets, for God's sake. Where would we find the billions upon billions and billions of dollars to buy nuclear subs? Mind you, we wouldn't have to buy that many. We would only have, they're about $1 billion each, I believe. And so that's quite expensive. And with our government, who's now signed a deal with the NDP, a Liberal NDP, these all the social programs and so forth that are going to come at us now, I just can't see us suddenly, spending money on nuclear submarines. We've got these old submarines that we bought from the Brits, which they forced on us. I think that was a mistake, but anyway, it's done and it's in the past. And yes, that definitely gives the Russians and the Americans. But as far as discussions, I don't think so. I don't think there's been any discussion on that as far as Canada goes. But let's wait over the next few weeks to what the defense minister says as far as what are the new announcements. The only thing we've done is sign an agreement last summer with the United States to enhance NORAD, enhance it, not rebuild it, not bring in new, but enhance it. And I honestly don't know what the hell that means. I really don't. And I don't know if it's going to be enough. But as that senator questioned them yesterday in the Senate, they did not have an answer for when or how much. They didn't have a clue. So it's almost like something out of a comedy show. I hate to say it. I hate to say that about, you know what I mean? And what you said about our troops up north, our Rangers, absolutely. Let me say that they're doing a fantastic job. They're doing an incredible job, but we need to help them, and we need to do more. We've got to do more, and we better do it now. Otherwise, like you said, we're going to be left out in the cold. Not to use that expression, but we're going to, if we don't do something now, and we've done Zippo. We've got 5 more ships coming by, 2026, I think, or 25. And those ships are lightly armed. As far as I understand, there's a lack of severe armament on those new patrol ships. So why did we not arm those ships, for God's sake? So we've got to, as the defense minister said yesterday, the game has changed. We're not, no more business as usual. No more business as usual, and we're not going back to the old days. That's gone. So we have to look ahead. We have to look ahead and start doing things differently.
Yeah, well, when I think of Canadian senator, any politicians discussing military things, all I can think of is Dr. Strangelove, and I don't get optimistic feeling about what they're going to conclude, unfortunately. But we can hope for the best, I guess. So thanks for coming on to talk to us today, Dave. And that column's at westernstandardonline.com, and I imagine you've got more coming for us, eh?
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. There's so much happening all over the world. It's just amazing. The world has changed. The world has changed overnight. It really has.
Great. Well, thanks, and we'll see what happens, Dave, and I'll talk to you again soon.
Okay, take care. Take care.
Great, thanks. So yeah, that's something of a pet issue with me, and as we said, there could be a lot of discussions. As Dave said, it's like $1 billion for a nuclear sub, and that would just be, I guess, one among who knows how many are messing around under there, perhaps dozens. But I think that point of principle, and the chances of the government getting it, as Dave said, too, are pretty slim. We'll do a dental plan across the country. We'll borrow, our great-grandchildren into oblivion, but they wouldn't spend on something like that. But as I said, you would have that defensibility saying, hey, we're there. We're at least there. I am personally not as concerned, though it's still a concern. I'm not concerned about the Russians running over the ice cap and invading through northern Canada and coming south. But I am concerned about a lot of disputes coming where Alaska up there, the Americans might say, well, you guys aren't there. We're expanding what we say is our turf up in the Arctic. We're Denmark. We've had that going back and forth on an island way out in the eastern Arctic where we're playing around, switching flags, and it's a funny little game. But in reality, it's another nation making claim on Arctic land that Canada claims is their own, and we can't get to it. So it's very difficult to claim that we can have it. Maybe the Chinese, as I said, I worked up there for years. The Mackenzie Delta alone, I refer to it as another Alberta is sitting up there. And what's this? Why does Canada need world adulation? What's great about being there, Cory? Well, George, there's resources up there. It's not a matter of just being there. As I was just getting into, there's another Alberta worth of oil and gas. There are thousands, literally thousands of capped oil and gas wells sitting up there. We've been doing exploration and drilling up there since the 60s, and we haven't taken a bloody drop out of it because we haven't even got a bloody pipeline coming through the Mackenzie Delta. And George saying, do you think any of these minerals will be mined? Well, should we just give up? Let it go? We're not going to get around to it? Hey, take it away. Take it away. It's never going to happen. Well, that's stupid. So no, we can defend this thing. We can get up there. We're never going to be a large military power. There's never going to be enough expenditure where people are going to say, boy, countries going to say, we're not going to mess around with Canada's Arctic sovereignty because, their military would slap us silly. No, we're a smaller country. We're not a military power. But part of what I see, as always with a lot of things, private enterprise is where we can have a lot of the solutions. Is that when I was talking to Sheree the other day on the interview, as I saw in the Arctic, we actually had government scientists borrowing space in our oil field camps up there in the Arctic because they didn't have the means and budget to get up there. So we out of goodwill, lent them the room to come in there and study seals and things out on the ocean. But if there's an incentive, if we would just let our private industry get up there, let them develop these things. There are people living in Inuvik and Tuk, all of those Arctic communities out there that would love to have some good productive resources to develop for themselves, for their kids to live. We just got to get it rolling. We got to get out of our own way. And as private enterprise moves up and develops those resources, then we've got a much stronger claim of saying, yes, we are there. You know, it doesn't have to be a big military presence, but we're saying we have staked our claim here. We're developing it. It is ours. Do not take it. Because right now, if China came in and roped off a chunk and said it's ours, how could we claim otherwise? We haven't even been there. We can't get there. We don't have a nuclear sub. We don't have nuclear powered icebreakers. Our helicopters, as somebody pointed out, are unfortunately terribly prone to falling out of the sky. So we're not going to have a very good claim for it. And we're letting it go right now. And it's very dangerous. And not just oil and gas, though there is loads of it up there. But yes, there are a lot of minerals that can be mined and a lot of things we can be doing up there. And as we get more forms of, again, you know, whether people agree or disagree, that modular nuclear power, things like that, we could have more independent communities up there with a better cost of living. It's funny, one of the things Dave mentioned was, you know, the Americans talking about bringing people up who want to work in Alaska as opposed to the ones just doing a shift. And that's fair enough. It takes a certain kind of person to love the Arctic. I mean, I did 4 winters up there and I didn't mind it. It's one of those, you know, nice place to work, but I wouldn't want to live there. It's just not for me. There's only so much of it. I'd love to see it in summer once on a vacation point of view, not a working point of view. It was always winter when I was there. But there are some people who dearly love it. There was a guy I worked with named George Rankin, and he couldn't get enough of the Arctic. When he'd work with us all winter on oil exploration, and then he would work on dew line site remediation and cleanup all summer. I mean, he just thrived on it up there. So he was a fantastic person to work with in the Arctic because he knew the area, he loved the area, and he never wanted to leave it. So getting a presence of people like, you know, Mr. Rankin up there and others, again, who are residing in the Arctic and loving it and developing it, we'll all win and do better as Canadians. Okay, I've beaten that whole story to death for a bit. Let's talk quickly about our sponsor one more time as we go along, and I got some more new stuff to go through, and that's Bitcoin Well. Speaking of keeping your money, keeping your stuff out of the hands of people who want to take it away from you, it's not just Arctic resources, it's your resources. We have a government, we have a state that will lock your bank accounts, that will take your money, that wants to punish you if you support the wrong causes. And even if you're not afraid of all of those things, well, there's people who like investing in different things, in different currencies, things such as that. Digital currencies, this is your way to get into them. Bitcoinwell.com. They'll show you the way. They've got their online courses. Because again, I think a lot of what keeps a lot of people from getting into it is it just seems odd. It's scary. It's strange. And it takes some explaining. That's fair enough. This is new. And these guys help you through that, show you what it's all about. They got their Bitcoin Academy on there. You can take the courses, you know, through their videos and things on their site and learn what it's all about and get set up. I mean, they got the set it and forget it situations they can help fix you up with, where a little bit every month goes into your wallet out of your account, just like a car payment. Or again, as I talked about the other day, commercial accounts. Here at Western Standard, we actually, a little portion of my pay comes in Bitcoin, and it gets matched by the Western Standard. It's voluntary, completely voluntary for every employee here. And that way a little more gets set aside into something different, a different form of funds, a different type of currency. So check them out, bitcoinwell.com. They got ATMs all throughout Western Canada. They're really making digital currencies become something real and viable and usable. So that is our sponsor. All right. Trudeau will never allow development in Alberta. We'll see. Probably not. We got Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland. This is going back to the theme I was on before I brought Dave on, back to media. So this is another thing. So the Bank of Canada disclosure of media enemies list was an isolated occurrence. You know, she's kind of dismissed, just an isolated occurrence. Do you understand how serious it is? Well, I'm sure Freeland doesn't understand how serious it is. I mean, she's only a little bit brighter than Trudeau, and that's a very low bar. But, you know, as a side note, think of Trudeau's cabinet. People like Freeland, people like Catherine McKenna, Seamus Reagan. This guy surrounds himself with. That's the unfortunate consequence of having a prime minister who really, come on, let's face it, he's not the sharpest knife in the drawer. He can regurgitate speeches, but when he tries to think on his feet, we can see as he trips over his tongue and delivers word salad, this man just doesn't have it all firing there. If it wasn't for the family name, he would not be at the front of this country. But he's got these ministers he surrounded himself with who aren't even much better. At least, if we could have a hammerhead as a prime minister, if he at least had a strong cabinet full of intellectuals, we could perhaps be functioning well. But no, we don't. So either way, Freeland saying it was just an isolated occurrence, that the Bank of Canada had a blacklist of media that, and again, the Bank of Canada, that's a government institution, essentially. The Blacklocks recorded a bank manager saying authorities would not be allowing Blacklocks to ask questions. So Blacklocks wasn't allowed questions while they were supposed to give preferential treatment to Bloomberg News. Government institutions picking and choosing who they're even going to give information to. This is a big, big problem. This really reflects that giant rot that's in our government, that hatred they have of disclosure, that hatred they have of critique, of having media outlets daring to break the government line, to go into areas that they don't want to hear about. And they're always pushing back. We got C10, now we got C11. They want to control the media. This is a scary, scary area. And to hear Freeland sort of dismiss it and just say, it was just an isolated incident. That's not a minor thing. Every country that has a constitution that protects free rights will always address free press and why it is so important. Because no authoritarian regime wants a free press. That undercuts them. That makes them accountable to the people. That's why Pravda was run by Russia. That's why every authoritarian regime has a state broadcaster, as do we with the CBC. Though they haven't made it a full monopoly yet, they're certainly trying for it, especially if they shut out independent media outlets. And this was just a case of a guy not even knowing that his mic was hot. It's something we learn around here. Watch when your mic is hot. And he explained that certain media were blacklisted from asking questions. This is Bader Sure, I think his name is, with the Bank of Canada. And they preferably give coverage to Bloomberg News. If you've got preferential news going out, you obviously are not getting balanced news, which is very problematic. Let's see here. We get a little farther. Oh, yes, the UCP is looks like they're going to be scrapping, that got leaked recently, their plan to change how traffic tickets are processed. They're going to get rid of that crazed plan of getting rid of traffic court. So some realism seems to be perhaps sinking in on this party that's been embattled by shooting themselves in their feet very regularly, unfortunately. And one of the big ones recently was this bizarre plan to take away your ability to defend yourself on traffic violations. I mean, I understand the courts take up a lot of time, but freedom is expensive sometimes. And hey, let's not pretend that every traffic violation you're guilty in. I think I'm guilty in 99% of the tickets I've gotten, but it's important that you have the ability to challenge that. And again, it's those individual rights. They look at it as something as if it's a convenience or a privilege or something to be easily dismissed. It's not. And the UCP burned on that, and it sounds like they're backing off on it. Thankfully, I mean, it was already supposed to be imposed a while ago, and they sort of put the brakes on it, and now it's going all together, which is good. Of course, a lot of that's tied into, well, we've got the UCP battles going on in Red Deer. So we got that news. It sounds like they're going to be spreading it out perhaps over 3 days in 3 different cities. I mean, there might be as many as 15,000 people voting in this. This is amazing. We've never seen anything quite like it. At $100 a pop, or some people paying even more because it'll get past the deadline, to cast their ballot one way or another on whether or not Jason Kenney should stay on as a leader. Again, I was optimistic about Kenney. I'm not thrilled seeing him get pushed out, but I think he's perhaps at a point, it's that bad. Just step aside for the sake of everything. But obviously he's not going to at this point. We're going to have to go through the whole thing. But now, if they change the voting rules, well, you want mistrust to really start firing up. I mean, but they're in a rock and a hard place. And the UCP seems to love putting themselves in a rock and a hard place, because it's going to be a gong show if you stick to the original rules. The original rules are 6 hours of voting time in Red Deer at one hotel. Think of having 15,000 people come and go and somehow cast a ballot and get it in at a location in 1 day, in 6 hours. It's not going to happen. It'll be insane, and people will go nuts. It might turn into riots for all I know. But then if you start spreading it around to different areas in different days, well, then people start wondering, well, what's your motivation? As has been pointed out by some, Rick Bell really tied into that today. Jason Kenney's very strong with a lot of the immigrant communities. I mean, when he was the immigration minister and others, he connected very well. That's what I liked about him a lot. He'd get on the ground with new Canadians all the time, and he was a very effective minister that way. But now, of course, he's utilizing those connections to garner a lot of support and sell those memberships and get people to come out and vote to support him. But a lot of people wouldn't necessarily feel like going all the way up to Red Deer to do it. So now if you have because I think they're talking about it, the voting center being in the Genesis Center, I believe, in Northeast Calgary. And this isn't confirmed yet, but this is what we're hearing about. And well, that, of course, facilitates where a lot of those memberships are being sold. The political play we're watching on this is unfortunately getting uglier and dirtier as we go along. It's unfortunate, but it's still fascinating at the same time. I really don't know what the heck's going to happen after April 9th, unless it goes to the 11th. I don't know how they're going to change these dates. What a crazy thing. Yeah, we'll be watching that develop. Side note, just on the other alternative media mess going on, I was just kind of watching the hornets swirling on Ryan Jesperson with that other show up in Edmonton. It's still down for an indeterminate amount of time. They still aren't on the air. I don't know what's going to happen. His own followers, this is the thing to be learned from this, the woke lunatics. They will turn on you. Don't build your following on them. There's no loyalty. They don't like you. They will rip you to shreds at the drop of a hat. These people who claim they like Jesperson, they claim they're his following, his supporters, have vanished. It's funny, some very prominent social media personalities on the left who always express their love for Jesperson have vanished on this issue. They've gone to ground. He hasn't tweeted in days. And there's others, of course, who are just outright in attack mode on him. Nobody's supporting him for the minor crime of getting in a dispute with his female producer. It really is. It was that simple. He was being, at worst, a bit belligerent and mansplaining, as the term is used, I guess. I can see why she got upset with it to a degree, but to the point where it sounds like they might have dynamited his entire show. As far as I can tell, it might not even come back because and you see these mobs, if you watch it, it's a horrifying thing to watch. It's like watching a swarm of army ants tearing apart a victim insect. They get into more and more of a frenzy, or a shark's feeding frenzy even, if one of their own starts bleeding, and they all just get more and more excited and they all start tearing at each other, and there's just no end to it. And you watch, even though Jesperson has put out his groveling apologies on video and on Twitter and everywhere he can, the mob, all that does is feed them. That's more blood in the water. So I don't know how many times the world's got to learn this with cancel culture, guys. Hey, if you do something wrong, we all do at times, apologize. Of course, be genuine. If you genuinely are sorry about it and you genuinely did something wrong. If it's you're apologizing because the mob is demanding it of you, you're just giving yourself to them. You're not going to win. They won't lay off. It won't be enough. It'll never be enough. Jesperson's learning that right now. And we're seeing it with so many other areas. And as I said, I am not... he irks me in a lot of ways, but I'm not celebrating the potential end of that show, because I do think the more alternative media we have out there, the better. Even if it's left-leaning alternative media like Ryan Jesperson's show, that's ideologically way different than mine. It's important for all of us to have as many outlets with as much discussion as possible. And the woke mob has destroyed their own outlet with this. They don't seem to realize they've hurt themselves as well as they go after Ryan, as they have been. It's just an awful thing to watch, but let's watch it, observe it, I guess, with a morbid curiosity, and see what comes out of it. So a reminder to everybody, yes, the westernstandardonline.com, to thank all you guys who have subscribed. James was saying today the subscriptions are going fantastic today, and they've been going great for months. That's why we are expanding, why we've got an Ottawa bureau now. We've got the new gentleman up in Saskatoon, BC. We're all over the place, getting more direct news to all of you. And there we go. There's that new reporter, Christopher Oldcorn. I'm going to have him on the show in a day or two here, and we'll talk to him. He's up in Saskatchewan. He's a very well-established journalist. And we do it because you guys have been subscribing. And if you haven't already, get on there, take out a subscription, use that code TRIGGERED. You get a discount, and it is very worth it. That's why we're growing, guys. They're buying the subscriptions, and they're sticking with them, right? If our product wasn't very good, hey, that's capitalism, right? We'd be slowing down. People take out a subscription, they try it for a month or two, and this stinks, and they move along. No, they're sticking with us because we've got some really good stuff. We've got great reporters, great columnists, and great content. So take one out, Be sure to share and like on all those social media platforms. I know it sounds cheesy when people always ask for it, but it's very important. It's how we spread the word, and it's how you can see the alerts when events are coming and happening out there. So on Facebook, YouTube, and of course Rumble. I really want to get more of that Rumble audience going, because that's the one that's least likely to cancel us if I say the wrong thing once or something happens. Either way, that's enough for today. Let's see, tomorrow, what have I got going on? I got to get to the bottom here. Oh, yes, I've got Melissa Embarkey coming in. We had to move her up because of a work issue. And people familiar with Melissa, she's a First Nations person who works in the energy sector. Very good common sense speaking. She wrote a column that was in the National Post today, firing back at all those goofy celebrities, Leonardo DiCaprio and all of them, who have been basically telling BC First Nations what they're supposed to be doing out there. So he's not very happy with it. And Jaime Rubenstein coming on, and he's an anthropologist, and he's written a column with us as well. And it's going to be talking about residential schools, which is another, of course, very controversial subject with a lot of sensitivities. But it'll be interesting to talk to Mr. Rubenstein and see what he's got to say about it. So thank you all for tuning in. I will see you all again tomorrow at 11:30 a.m.